So are Democratic Party figures aligned with Obama, are they beginning to jump ship, not wanting to go down with it, not wanting to go down with the Titanic? Are they jumping ship? That is the second aspect.
Yeah.
Both of those aspects have to be considered carefully.
It's a desperate attempt, in my opinion, to attempt to try to pardon the family if she's going to run for president.
Yes.
David, we'll come to you in a minute. I wanted to play this video. We watched it earlier, and you mentioned the border, Jacob, and I wanted to share this video, and then we'll go to David. David, I don't think I've seen anything quite like this in a long time, but this is the congressional hearings of Mayorkas, and it's an awful video in terms of what they've been able to find. This is Republicans got some courage to ask him some questions. Mayorkas is Department of Homeland Security, gone to Congress, answer some questions, and we found out some interesting things. We'll play this video. It's about 2 minutes, so bear with it, and then we'll come back to David.
The New York Times, thousands of children have ended up in punishing jobs across the country, working overnight in slaughterhouses, replacing roofs, operating machinery in factories, all in violation of child labor laws. To come to office in 2021, huge surge, reports of trafficking, reports of neglect.
Since the Fair Labor Standard Act of 1938, children under the age of 16 have been restricted from working under the conditions that Mayorkas is exponentially creating.
You are failing miserably. 4 to 5 million people, 1.4 million unknown gotaways. We have no idea who those people are, what kind of security they risk. You're not giving me any stats whatsoever in terms of the number of people that are human trafficked, how many young girls are sex trafficked. You don't have a clue. You wouldn't even answer how many dead bodies, which is very well documented, at the border. Do you not care? Do you not have just an ounce of human compassion for what your open border policy, the type of human depredations it is causing? You just sit there looking with a blank look on your face.
So how bad is it?
And I have seen the evidence of kids being reused to create a family unit. Same kid over and over again. Rent a kid. Not humane. It's not 90% going to parents anymore. It's a third or less going to parents in today's statistics and numbers. Now, Ms. Rodas, you have said that the U.S. government is the middleman in a multi-billion-dollar migrant child trafficking operation. What did you mean when you used the term middleman?
So the United States government is receiving the children from the smugglers at the border. And HHS is a $2.7 trillion agency, and over the last 2 years has spent approximately $10 billion. So they are using that money to receive those children and then transport those children to the end user. I was shocked and I am stunned that there is no one with law enforcement experience overseeing where children are going. You have people applying for children who we know are members of transnational criminal organizations, yet there's no one with any data analytics background or anything like that overseeing this operation. When one individual can sponsor 20 or 30 or 40 people and no one's asking a question about it, there's something seriously wrong and flawed with that program.
OR releases him. They send him to Florida. He's over there hanging out with a fella, his sponsor, not a father, not a mother, just a sponsor. And what does he do? A few short months later, he kills him. He kills him. Now, I don't know what the protocol is down there, but when I look at this guy, he's got more chin whiskers than more 40-year-olds have. Look at that guy. Now, how does a guy like that get into this country as a minor?
You said these kids are being recruited in their home country. What do you mean by that?
There's an example of a sponsor who currently is in Austin, Texas at this moment. He attempted to sponsor 4 children, 1 from the Pomona Fairplex Emergency Intake Site and 3 from the Pecos Emergency Intake Site promising work to these children who are making $2.50 a day on the coffee farm he owns in Guatemala. So he lured them here. The Department of Homeland Security has transnational criminal organizations on the TOC watch list, some of who got their fingerprints here in Washington, D.C. and neighboring areas, are sponsoring the children. It's indisputable. So the money goes to the trafficker who ultimately brings them here. The New York Times actually showed, I think, Hannah Dreier did an amazing expose where she actually showed the debt page of the child, how much the child had to pay for food, how much the child had to pay for rent, all of those things. So
So the administration is really, we're engaged in creating slavery. We are trafficking slaves to this country.
absolutely, there is no doubt. We have created a pool, and because this criminal element tragically views children as a commodity, they see us as the middleman because we're paying the flight directly to the end user, the trafficker. But then also the case managers who are not law enforcement, right? They're not investigative. They are receiving documents, photographs of documents on their WhatsApp phone. And there's a perfect example, a 20-plus-year-old man sponsored what we believed was his sister, who was only 16 years old. He submitted a birth certificate for himself and her as brother and sister. And then about 10 days after she's released, we see she's for sale on his WhatsApp page. You know, her shirt is buttoned down to her navel. She's all made up.
Wow. This is, I don't know what to say. Criminal, slave trade, child trafficking, you name it, it's going on. David, we'll go to you first, then we'll go to Jacob. Your take on the congressional hearings. I mean, the Republicans are taking it to task finally, maybe for the first time, maybe a little too late of what's going on, but just give me your take on it. What in the world is happening at the border?
Well, first of all, we have to understand the grand scheme. The grand scheme is as follows. One, they are trying to tip red states, conservative voting states, or states that are purple, could go either way, such as Arizona, but certainly Texas is the main site, to try to saturate those states with illegal immigrants and then give them citizenship in the expectation that they will vote Democrat and be able to turn these more conservative states into pro-liberal Democrat woke states, etc., into red states, from red states to blue states. That is the first plan. The second plan is the corruption of certain industries. The United States is now retrenching to a large degree, as are other Western countries, from outsourcing to China. They are trying to repatriate a lot of those jobs that have been labor intensive. Now, no way the United States can compete in labor intensive jobs with countries that pay $5 an hour when Americans get paid $20 or $25 an hour for the same job. So where are you going to get people who work for slave wages? Well, you have to get slaves. That is the second thing. There are companies and industries associated with the Democratic Party who have an economic interest in this slavery. Now, what really disturbs me is this. They're yelling about the woke culture of a slavery that disappeared 150 plus years ago, that no longer exists, and they're trying to make it a contemporary issue and demand compensation for people who were never slaves from people who never owned slaves. This is how absurd it is. At the same time, they are perpetuating and actually complicit in the most unspeakable forms of slavery imaginable, including sexual slavery of children and minors, as well as slave labor, de facto slave labor. That is what is happening. The Democratic Party is complicit in the promulgation of modern slavery. They may not call it that, but it amounts to the same thing in substance. And
That's
it's
right.
Latinos who are the chief victims.
Yeah. Incredible. That place, which you mentioned, Pomona County Fair. It's only about 20 some minutes from my house. I know exactly where it is because that's what they've been sending a lot of children. People
Yep.
are coming out from the border. They were sending them there. And it was a place where you can't find children. After a while, you know, they come in and they disappear. We
Yep.
don't know where they went. I'm not saying exactly where they went, but the reality of it is that's what's going on. David Lister, what's your take on this?
All right, the first thing I would say is we need to pray for these two women that stood up and exposed all this evil for their protection. You know, we've
That's
known
right.
people whose planes went down, et cetera, so evilly. So please pray, Miss Rodas and Miss Gonzalez, if I remember right. And so, and who is one of them, Miss Gonzalez is a Christian, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So anyway, pray for them and their protection for doing such a good thing. But you know, I saw the videos of traffickers taking and putting kids right on the borderline and then run away. And then now comes our people and they pick them and take them to these centers. And then the next thing they're shipped off. I mean, this has to be some of the most wretched and horrible things. And the left is always shouting about trafficking, about slave labor. They're the ones that shout about it, but this is them that are doing it and allowing it. But they're not shouting now. They have no strength to stand up and say how evil this is, because it's the left, the Democrats, those that they elect, that are doing this to these young people. And they say, and then when there's even more evil, such as the sterilization of children, it's just wretchedness. This is no wonder God's wrath is filling up. And
Yes.
it is just, I can't even think about this. You know, I see where the UN's going. Everybody's going to sexualize our children and create just a slave craft. This is the days of Lot that's coming, where people will just, even if they were blinded, they still want to have sex. It's going so bad, and a pox on these people. And to stand up there, Mr. Majorca, may God remove him. I mean,
he
even say
stood there,
nothing.
nothing, just like, you know, in my opinion, just glazed over his eyes, demonically inspired, in my opinion.
Yes.
No sympathy, no emotion. The fact that there are little kids being raped, find DNA, you know, 65 different DNAs, different kinds of DNA in a little girl's body inside of her, it doesn't move him at all. Davey, you wanted to say something, Davey from Australia.
Yeah, I just can't help it. It reminds me of Revelation chapter 18, you know, verse 13, where it talks about how they traded in slaves and human lives. And that's basically what's going on here. And as Jacob said before, he nailed it. This is the worst form of slavery ever. And it's the sexual abuse is just horrendous. But it's also too, I have heard of and read of stories where they're being sold for organs, basically body organ harvesting, and that too. It's and that woman was right. She nailed it. They're being treated as a commodity. They're a commodity. Just they're a monetary thing.
You know, this is
Marco, can I add one thing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Sometime back when Trump was in, I was actively running my Twitter account, and there was a movie star that was on, and she really loved kids, and she had been in a bad situation. I'm not going to name her, but she had been abused. Okay. And she felt a lot of empathy for these children. And she was one of the few stars that went down to the border to actually check it out. Okay. And, you know, and because she couldn't believe that this Trump would do this. And I said, well, why don't you just go see for yourself? Ask questions like, were these cages there under Obama? How did it come? I gave her some questions. And soon afterwards, she went. And she was very empathetic about that. She was going to help, do whatever she can. When she come back, she went completely silent. I think she was told, you know, let it go.
Let it go.
You know, because she had such passion for the children. And I understand why, especially having had something so horrible as abuse. But that's what happened. They probably get told to shut up. just to silence them. You lose your career, you'll lose your job, you'll lose it. We know this counseling happens.
Yeah.
And may
According
God
to the-
help us come back from this brink of madness.
Yeah, destructive. The UNICEF considers the United States to be one of the top destinations for child trafficking and exploitation. And these traffickings have been reported literally in all 50 states. So, somebody could say, well, at least it's not happening here. I'm in a conservative area. No, it's happening there too.
Happening
Because it's,
everywhere. What Davey
Yeah.
said is right. It harkens Revelation.
Babylon.
Yeah, and the slaves, both free and slaves. You've got various kinds of slavery, and it's certainly traditional Black African slavery still exists in Chad, Mauritania, in the Islamic countries of South Africa, where rich Muslims own Black slaves. Okay, there's that, but this is just another form of slavery. It's employment contracts of Ethiopian girls being taken into Saudi Arabia, and they pay the parents, families $200, and it's basically they put them in a harem. It's basically slavery. Well, what you see in the United States is the Democratic Party, the party of slavery, being the party of slavery. It's just what they did in the 19th century. It's just the party of slavery, the Democratic Party, the party of slavery, still being what it has always been, the party of slavery.